Now, in previous videos, you've seen how to actually find the center of a spindle, how to attach that spindle to the lathe. Now, this video will show you exactly how you should take that square spindle and turn it round on the lathe. And we'll get to that in just a second. Now, before we get started actually turning this square spindle round, we'll need to cover just a couple of basic things. We'll start with the placement for the tool rest. Now, the tool rest is adjustable back and forth and in and out. And you want the tool rest as close to the work as you can get it without actually touching it. And it's best if you set it where the tool rest itself is parallel to the center line of the work. And there's several different ways that you can do that. What I do is I sight down the edge of the tool rest onto the ways on the bed of the lathe. And then I line it up with that, and that automatically makes me parallel to the gouge. So you're always going to have to adjust the tool rest height each time you change tools. There's just no other way to do it. You just have to constantly change the height as you change tools. Now, all tool rest, well, I won't say that. Most all tool rest have the center line of the axis on the piece itself. Now, as far as the height goes, that is going to vary from tool to tool. Essentially, what you want is for the cutting portion of the tool to be in the center of the work. So, almost invariably, you're going to have the tool rest below center. The biggest single mistake that most new turners make is they put their tool rest too high. And that puts the center of the work well above center on the piece. So you want the cutting portion of whichever tool you're using to be in the center line on the work. And of course, as I said, that's going to vary from tool to tool. The spindle roughing gouge is a larger tool. So when you set this on the tool rest, the center of the cutting portion is higher than it would be if you were using, say, a spindle, what's known as a finger groove, right in here. Now that's a place to take your index finger. And this is what you actually guide the tool with. You don't just put it up and hope for the best. You want to guide it. So you put your finger in this finger groove. Then you lay the tool on top of your index finger. And then as you go from one end of the tool rest to the other, you're actually guiding the tool with your index finger. And this gives you exactly the same depth of cut for the whole length. And that's why you want this tool rest parallel to your center line, so that when you're going from one side to the other, you're having a consistent cut all the way across. Now, another thing that you have to consider is the bevel on whatever tool that you're using. Now, your bevel is that portion of the tool that actually goes on the grinding wheel when you sharpen it. So this is the bevel on the roughing gouge. Now, you want to do what's known as ride the bevel. So you would not approach this piece with your tool perpendicular to it, because then you're not riding the bevel. If you're going to ride the bevel, it has to be at an angle. Now, the angle on here is a 45-degree angle. So you're going to pretty much have to be at a 45-degree angle to your tool rest. Now, you don't actually put it completely on the bevel. If you do, it doesn't cut. So you would have it just slightly less than the angle on the tool. And then it will cut all the way across. You're using your index finger to guide it, and you use your thumb to hold it in place. And then it will slide all the way across from one side to the other with exactly the same depth of cut. Now, this is what it looks like when you turn it on. Now my index finger is in the finger groove. I make sure the tool is in contact with the tool rest before I engage it. And I get over to where I'm going to ride the bevel. And that makes a consistent cut from one end to the other. So I'm taking off the same amount of material for the entire length of the spindle. And then when I get it down to where it's round, I'll have a consistent diameter from one end to the other. Another thing you need to be conscious of is the amount of flute that you're using to approach the work. When we talk about the flute, that's the open section down the center of gouges. You'll find the flute in the spindle rough and gouge. You'll find it in your bowl gouges and your spindle gouges. Now, if your flute is straight up, then that would be considered open. If you rotate the tool 90 degrees, now your flute is closed. And a good rule of thumb for a rough and gouge is you want your flute open to about a 45-degree angle. So now you would come back, set your flute at a 45-degree angle, find the bevel angle. You've got your index finger that's guiding it. Then you maintain that same angle from one end of the piece to the other. Now, as you begin to turn this square, the actual distance from the tool rest to the piece widens. And you want to stop from time to time and adjust your tool rest. And you always spin the piece before you turn it on to ensure that the piece is not going to hit your tool rest. So once you spin it, you know you have clearance. You can turn it back on and you'll set it up again. You get your index finger in the groove, get your angle on your bevel, open the flute to about 45 degrees. Now, a couple of things that you want to look out for. As you're turning, you can see we still have flat spots. And there should be 4 of them, but we only have 2. The other 2, no, there's a third one. The 4th one has actually been turned off, so it wasn't quite completely centered when we had it on, when we mounted it between centers. But you can check to see if it's round. You can put your thumb on the top and your index finger behind it. And as you run your fingers across this, you can actually feel the bump where the flat spot is. And you want to turn it down until the flat spots are gone. The danger of putting your finger up here is if you get onto the front. When I do it, I put my thumb on the top, the index finger on the back, because it's turning in this direction. So it would want to pull your thumb down to that tool rest. And if you get a finger or a thumb between the workpiece and that tool rest, it will ruin your whole day. So if you're going to touch the piece on the top, make sure you put your thumb on the top. Or you can just turn it off and look if you're not comfortable actually touching the top. Now, the spindle is round. All of the flat spots are gone, and it's fairly smooth. You can get it fairly smooth with a roughing gouge, but the secret to success is in that index finger. If you get that index finger and use it correctly, then you can go from one side to the other with the piece and take off exactly the same amount of material all the way across, and you wind up with a cylinder that's about the same diameter from one end to the other. And that's essentially how you turn a cylinder. And the best tool to do that with is the spindle roughing gouge. Now, once you have your spindle roughed out, sometimes you want to have this really, really smooth. There's projects where a portion of the piece is a cylinder, so you would want to make that as smooth as possible. On most pieces, it's not that important. You just want to get it down to your finished diameter, and then you'll put your beads and coves in it, and that will modify the cylinder. But for those projects that actually have a cylinder as part of the project, which you'll find on the first actual project that you turn in this class, on the doorstop, a portion of it remains a cylinder. So I'm going to show you how to take that down smooth with a skew. It's about the only thing that we use the skew for in the beginning class, simply because the skew is a difficult tool to learn. Now, when you're using a skew, it's done differently. You actually lay the blade down on the work, and you cut as you're sliding the skew across. Now, you could do it from this position, but it's much more difficult because it's harder to see. So this is really the only exemption to the fact that you want to keep the tool rest set up to keep the cutting portion of the tool in the center here. What we're going to do is raise that tool rest and get it up high enough to where when we lay the skew on it, it's in a position where we can see it better. And you're going to ride the bevel. The skew has a bevel on both sides. So you're going to ride the bevel on the skew very similar to the way you did with the roughing gouge. The index finger will be in the finger groove. The thumb will control it. And you raise or lower the handle to change the angle on the cutter. So you would simply slide it down through here and it would make a cut. And again, if you put the bevel down to where it's actually touching the work, it doesn't cut. But if you raise that handle a little bit, you'll find that you'll see that it begins to cut. And that's what you want to find. You're going to take off a very small amount of material, and it's a tool that you have to maintain a great deal of control on. If that skew digs in, it produces a very spectacular catch. Now, another important thing is, because this is round, only a very small portion of the wood is in contact with the skew itself. The ends are not touching the wood at all. And you want to keep that portion of the blade that's actually doing the cutting in the center of the skew. If you get that long point where it gouges into that wood, it will produce a very spectacular catch. And the short side will also catch. So you want to keep the actual portion of the tool that's cutting in the center. And it looks something like this. And that produces a very smooth, clean cut. It's a little tricky to learn, but once you learn how to do it, it'll serve you well in smoothing a cylinder. And that's about it for this video, and we will do another video on another day.